Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Well, hi everyone. Thanks for joining us today. It's the end of the month on the last day of June. Welcome to the Inbound Lunch Bunch. Actually, the session is going to be a wrap up and kind of an overview of what we've done for throughout the course of the year, starting last year in our kind of school year, if that's what we call it. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Manisha Mangus. I'm the Director of Consulting here at HighRoad Solution. My background is in digital marketing, so I've been working with associations and nonprofits and societies for quite a number of years, helping them make the move from standard communications to the world of marketing and growth through digital practices. So my specialty is in lead generation, so I'm always excited to talk about the inbound marketing concept. And I always welcome everyone kind of reaching out to me whenever you have any ideas or any questions. Certainly feel free to reach out and connect with me online. A couple of housekeeping items for those of you who have been diligently following us throughout the year. I think you all know that there are a number of series and number of sessions that are available to you. So I encourage you to look through those if you haven't had a chance to. In particular, we have a set of toolkits. It's a program called Toolkit of the Month. If you haven't subscribed, I encourage you to go ahead and find the program and subscribe. There are a number of materials that you'll find really handy, especially if you're a marketing practitioner. You rarely have time to create materials, and so it's always nice to have a toolkit that you can start with and then build on. If I suddenly happen to drop off the call or the session ends, bear with me. Just hang tight. We'll dial back in and re-kick everything off. But that's the kind of the nature and the beast of being digital and virtual sometimes. If you have any questions, certainly feel free to put them in the chat window, and I will try to answer them as we go through the presentation or towards the end of our discussion. So what I thought I would start with is a year in review. And, because we get so caught up in the day-to-day of our marketing activities, we often don't get a chance to take a step back and take a look at all the depth and the breadth of the things that we've covered. So this is our opportunity to kind of take a look and say, starting from last year around September, which is when we kicked off kind of our calendar, our school year, if you will, all the way through to last month, we wanted to kind of take a look and see what we were talking about. And so, certainly when you're in the moment and kind of going month to month, you're focused on certain things, but we saw a couple of trends that seem to emerge, and especially with the Inbound Lunch Bunch, right? So remember, the Inbound Lunch Bunch, this particular program is designed and predicated on the inbound marketing methodology. So I thought it would be nice to kind of quickly go through these, just so that, one, if you've missed some of these, I encourage you to kind of go back and take a look at these. What I also like is that we pulled together to show you kind of the corresponding toolkits that were related to that. So part of the HighRoad U program here at HighRoad Solution is designed to say, here over the course of a month, we're going to go through one specific topic, and then we're going to break it out based on your marketing practitioner view, from an inbound marketing perspective, or from a lead gen perspective, or from a toolkit perspective, that kind of thing. So, the overall trend kind of going forward from September through to, this year into May, a couple of things that kind of jumped out at us, about the things that we were talking about. A lot of it had to do with kind of all under the umbrella of inbound marketing. We're really talking about what kind of metrics that are used for success, content marketing for lead generation opportunities, what that user journey looks like and how that experience feeds back into what you can do from an inbound marketing perspective, all the talk about lead gen and conversion. All right, so the whole point of all of this is to really kind of paint the picture to say that as part of the inbound marketing practice and methodology, there are a number of things that you could be doing, and all of it's driving towards lead generation. So the overall trend in the market, and I think it's interesting to kind of see this happen over the course of time, but we're now kind of entrenched in the ship kind of already turning midstream, right? So we've gone and we've definitely kind of seen the movement from communications, which is the retention model, to what we're calling the acquisition model, which is the kind of the growth recruitment model, and inbound marketing plugs directly into that. So what I thought we would do kind of today is, of course, we'll go through our inbound refresher and then hit on a couple of things that were pervasive throughout the year from kind of most critical topics that I just want to hit on and cover. So from our inbound methodology, this might look familiar to you. It's what we use. We've used this every month, but remember that it's a methodology that incorporates a number of different strategies. It rolls in digital marketing, it rolls in content marketing, it rolls in quite a bit of different kind of marketing perspectives and marketing methodologies, and pulls it all together under these pillars. And the idea here is to say that out in the world of what you do, whatever you do in whatever capacity and wherever your organization is on that digital transformation map, the idea is that you're sitting out there and you want to attract strangers, you want to connect with them and convert them into visitors so they continue to come back to you. You want to further engage with them so that they move from the funnel perspective of being a lead into a customer, right? Someone who's actually had that revenue transaction. And lastly, you want to delight them and turn them into advocates. So all the activities that you do fit into any one of these categories. So the activities are digital activities, digital marketing activities in the form of your website, in the forms of your landing pages. So all the different kind of vehicles that you have sitting out there, they all kind of can find their place inside of this model. So what's really nice about this is that essentially, once you put the framework in place, all you're doing now is you're feeding it. And that's what associations in particular do really well with, is that you have the content and you know the market and you know what the pain points are. So therefore, you're leveraging everything you can do from a digital perspective to drive these people to your landing pages or your blog or your social media posts or your calls to action or any kind of cost combination of what you're trying to do. So when you think about it, it's a very powerful model. A lot of people get caught up in the little pieces, the executional things, right? The whole point is to remember this is part of a bigger model where you are constantly trying to drive up your growth, right? You're trying to increase your growth. So when you think of it from that perspective, we're looking at a MarTech stack that's for primarily for retention, right? That's typically kind of the traditional communications model. In the old the old viewpoint, it used to be drawn from a systems perspective, right? When it was talking about your true MarTech stack, it was talking about your association management system in the center, your website off to the side. Maybe you've got a couple of landing pages that you have with other external vendors out to another side, and your email platform is sitting out there, right? So the idea was it was all around kind of the data that you had, at the time, and it was all aggregated. What we're looking at today is things kind of, broken apart, right? Almost deconstructed and kind of reconstructed to say that at the heart of all of this, everything that you do, even from a technology standpoint, all your technical systems, they're all designed to feed into that user of one. So you may have heard a lot of people talk about that market of one, that we're no longer talking about that batch and blast technology. It's no longer kind of the whole swath of people. It's like that market of one, that individual person, because now the expectation is that we have enough data that you should really know who you're talking to. And it's not enough to know that. It's more important now and becoming more critical to demonstrate that you know that, because a lot of that ties into the user experience, etc. So the idea here is that now everything's being deconstructed to say that your user sitting out there in the middle, you have all this information about them. Now what can you tap into from an inbound marketing methodology perspective to get them to do what you want them to do, to follow that user journey, to follow that ideal user experience. So this is nice kind of in this model, but you'll notice one thing, right? So this is predicated on a model where you know who the person is, right? To get to that person in the middle, all the way at the center, and have that person is really assuming that you already know who they are and you have the mechanisms to reach out to them. Right, so that's why we kind of typically stack this, or we typically reserve this for the retention MarTech stack. The one for growth, or what we call recruitment, right, acquisition, you see the whole thing still remains the same, right? You still have your user in the center, you still got all of your vehicles around it, your channels, etc. But this whole piece kind of over here on the side, that's the piece that drives the person to get that information, right? So that's how we get this person and put them back in the center. Without it, it's a closed off environment. So it works really well if you know who the person is. It's hard, though, to know what to say to that person from a personalization standpoint, from a program and services standpoint, if you don't know them, right? So the idea here is that in order to create that space and have them feed into your funnel, right, you need to use your inbound marketing methodology approach for that. So in the form of landing pages, right, with forms, you're doing advertising, you're driving to go and collect all these new pieces of information, most importantly, those new email addresses that you can then put them into your flows and then work them as you normally would, right? So powerful things when you kind of overlap them on top of each other. But the whole trend of the year and everything that we're definitely seeing in the market today is all about lead generation. Rather, whether you've been tasked with saying like, hey, I need to grow by 20%, we need to grow our membership base is constricting, it's being constrained over time, we need to go and get a new generation of members. How do we go and get those if we don't know who they are, right? So the whole point about getting leads is that it's tied obviously to growth, it's to the bottom line, it's revenue driven, right? The whole point is to grow your membership base, and you are looking for people, they're not completely unknown to you, right? So I think that's a little bit of a misconception there, that they are unknown in the sense that, yes, you don't know the individual person, but you know the type of member that you're looking for. And that's one of the things that's a strength within the association market. Now, you have a lot of people who have worked in the industry for long enough to know, to know what type of person would be a good fit for your member. I think traditionally over time, it's been historical, it's been passed down. You can certainly kind of figure out and take a look to say, like, here's a typical member in your base today that is representative and who does all the things that we want them to do. They're highly engaged with us from a concept of they consume the information we put in front of them, but they're also engaged because they they participate with us in the way that we want them to. They are also tied to the bottom line. They contribute their own revenue dollars. So, this is the ideal person. The next step is to go and find that ideal person. You want to go and find the like-minded people, right, and get them into your organization so that you can grow over time. The compelling reason to go and do this is essentially that 20%, you may have heard this, the statistic and kind of referenced before, but 20% of your email list will degrade every year, right? So if you start out with 100 email addresses at the beginning of 2016, by the end of the year, you have probably 80 email addresses to work with. If you don't supplement and if you don't go and put back that 20, those missing 20 that you lost over the course of time, right, through whatever it might be, through attrition, through anything, right, your list is going to continue to shrink, and therefore your message is going to continue to shrink. Right, so the idea here is you have to go and get the leads, and a lot of it is a numbers game. So I guess the question then becomes, why don't a lot of organizations do this, or why do they struggle? I think it's safe to say that now in the marketplace today, everybody knows they have to go and find them. I think there's still, again, a perception that they're not so easy to find. Right, so what we kind of thought about is, why are they so difficult to acquire? And it comes down to a couple of things. One is that it's a perception, right? It's perceived as a sales-oriented function, and that can be kind of a big detriment to marketing teams getting together and kind of moving and pursuing those leads. It's seen as a cold calling mechanism. You have to go and get leads. That means you have to pick up the phone and cold call someone, and it's very off-putting, and there's just, it's just not something that marketing or communications does. And there's also the perception that it's expensive, right? That you have to outsource all of this stuff. You have to get an actual salesperson, or you have to get someone dedicated, who sits on payroll, who does that overhead type of work, right? So, that alone is like a big challenge within the organizations today. There's also the lack of awareness from in terms of what can you do, right? There's a digital marketing whole aspect that you can leverage to go and get those sales. So most people aren't really, familiar or more kind of uncomfortable with the idea, or not quite sure where to start. It seems almost overwhelming to them. We have a website, we've got our email marketing platform. We're not quite sure how to make the bridge and bridge that gap and to be able to get people into a funnel that we can kind of work, right? So that really comes down to a couple of things, right? Following the traditional model of doing kind of simple segmentation, and not really thinking through and thinking about, who is my ideal member, right? And go back to that concept, because especially in the world of inbound marketing, persona development is really tied and very closely affiliated with all the precepts for inbound marketing. If you think about it, you'll kind of see this diagram over here at the side, right? The traditional sales funnel, or the funnel, is wide at the top, narrow at the bottom. What we see kind of in the world of the association market today is that the funnel is kind of double-edged, and it's double-edged because you do two things. Your teams are definitely pulling double duty, because you've got to continue to keep that rapport or build that rapport, and continue to keep your brand evangelists happy. Right, so you're kind of working the bottom of the funnel because they've already converted, but you had to kind of work them up and down to make sure that you can move them along that revenue pipeline as well. And then you've got the top part that's got to work for your unknowns, right? You're hunting and you're prospecting for these leads, right? And the whole purpose of this is to move them down that funnel so that they become that evangelist, right? So you're kind of pulling double duty for that, and then that in turn becomes a little bit daunting. And then, the last piece or last kind of trend in terms of why sometimes lead gen is perceived is difficult or a little bit more challenging, or leads are actually harder to find, is that nobody's really kind of fishing where the fish are. And, that goes back to, one, knowing who your ideal member is, and not just knowing kind of here are their demographics and here's their title, but really thinking about, living in their shoes and knowing how they go about their day and how they do their business, and more importantly, how your organization fits in to help them. Right? If they have a pain point and they have a gap, how is your organization positioned to be able to help them do that? And then what else do you know about them? Do they consume information on the weekend? Does it make sense to send them emails on the weekend if they do consume information on the weekend? How do they access information? How do they access your website? Do they look at, are they on their phone a lot? Do they use a tablet? Therefore, is your website responsive? Are you providing information in a way that's easy for them to consume? Right, there are all these little details about knowing, do they spend a lot of time in traffic and therefore they're pressed for time, right? So, there are all these different concepts and components of building out those personas that makes you understand kind of where are they in the rest of the digital world, right? Are they on LinkedIn mostly? Are they on Twitter? Do they really actually strangely, gravitate towards Facebook? Is Facebook kind of their source for peer-to-peer networking, or kind of seeing what the general trends in the marketplace are? Right. So, the big challenge here is that there's a heavy reliance on email alone, or it's kind of it's a single stream instead of kind of the more omni-channel, multi-channel approach. Right. So the idea here, again, is to overcome some of these so that you can generate those leads and then further, move forward. So from that perspective, right, as part of lead gen, and especially in particular in lead generation, banner ads or digital advertising was one of the big topics that we talked about throughout the year. And, it was a big, heavy push, again, from that perspective, really kind of answering the question, how do we get in front of people who don't provide their email address? It's hard to email someone when we don't know what their email address is. So obviously you should not go and buy a list, right? The data that you buy in that list, one, is questionable, and then you're kind of pushing up against canned spam laws anyway, right? But the idea here is, how then can you organically start to collect stuff? Where do you put all your listing posts and then have them drive to an area where you can collect their information and then put them into something where you constantly talk back to them, you touch base with them, put information in front of them? Right, so banner ads, again, are a way in which to advertise your message. And it's really definitely kind of a shift to what we're seeing from the push marketing, which is to flood the market and put your banner ads everywhere, to pull marketing, right, which is to say, let's put all our banner ads in the places that make the most sense based on who we know, what we know about these individuals that we want to capture, these individuals that we're looking or that we're hunting for. And that's really kind of the change or the transition that's happened today. So from that perspective, right, the idea now is to think about, if I have all these banners, yes, I should plaster them everywhere, but let me take a moment to figure out what's the best way in which to get my message across. And we say that because, again, if you think about it from your own user experience, we just had a conversation one of our clients earlier in the week where they were talking about their own user experience and what they have a tendency to do or not to do, right? But either way, if you put your banner ad into a place and then you don't change your message, or you plaster it everywhere, you do run the risk of it being ignored. So of course you don't want to you want to be a little strategic in thinking about what's the appropriate fit. is my message on point inside of the banner ad altogether? And then should I be putting it everywhere, or should I be selective based on what I'm doing and who I'm trying to target? So you can be placing banner ads all over the place, right? Beyond just a website, but kind of an integrated in an integrated fashion. So emails, blog notification emails are definitely one in particular that we often see missed. Anything where you've got an email going out, it could be e-commerce receipts, so those transactional emails as well, right? So not necessarily saying that you bypass kind of the mechanisms where people say they don't want to receive, but your e-commerce receipts, everyone looks at them. So if you can be subtle and put in your message in there, that would be a way in which to kind of drive your revenue. Of course, what you want to do is when you put all of these out there, especially on the digital world, you want to tie some sort of trackable URL to them so that you can attribute the source. So what we're also seeing kind of in the market now, and I think probably it's one of the topics that we'll get into, when we pick back up in September, but it's all about attribution, right? So if you've heard of this term, so attribution is about saying how, when I have to go and report to say like, hey, here are all the activities that I did, here's the amount of money that I put into it, and therefore I did convert, right? So the big challenge is to get the conversion. The next challenge is to say, out of all the things you did, if you did 5 things, if you advertised, if you put a banner on your website, you did a paid social media campaign, you sent out an email, you hosted a webinar, right? And then you actually went to a trade show, and that one person came through and converted. How much of it, like, where are you going to actually say the source of that person came from? Right? And how much do you attribute to it? Is it the last action? Typically it is, right? But that's not necessarily true, especially if you're starting to follow that inbound methodology, right? To say, is the blog post the reason why this person came and registered and became a member, right? They converted, or was it the series of blog posts combined with a banner ad that they saw while they were off of our site plus some other thing, right? So that's kind of the new thing or new challenge, is to try to figure out, where does that attribution come from? But it becomes important then from that perspective to really think about, where do you put all your stuff and how do you get that information kind of in the door? One of the other things definitely when we touched on, you probably kind of saw this in the trend of the webinars that we put together over the course of the year, is definitely touching on the value and the power of social media. So we have identified that social media is the best way to get in front of those who don't know you, especially when you're trying to figure out kind of, from a channel perspective, what that channel is. The idea here is that, that concept of birds of a feather flock together, it's not far from the truth, right? The idea here is to say, if your ideal member is a heavy LinkedIn user or is on LinkedIn, what you want to do is you want to go on LinkedIn and you want to expose your message to people that would generally kind of gravitate towards that message. The best way to do that is to put some money behind sponsored content on LinkedIn or some sort of sponsored campaigns, because the social media platforms open that up and give you a wider audience. So it's the differences between, having a banner ad that's sitting out there on a website, but the website has, tons of traffic on it, whereas going to a LinkedIn group or going to something on social media where specifically, let's say of the 10,000 people that come through a website that you put your banner ad on, 5,000 of those actually are on LinkedIn, and they all, are like-minded. So, the value of putting your ad or your money or your sponsored content on a LinkedIn ad in front of those 5,000, from a numbers perspective, gives you a higher return, because you're more likely to be finding people that are like-minded and who are thinking in the same way that your other ideal members are thinking, and therefore more likely to convert. So the nice thing about the social media platforms, or just kind of the channel in general, is that all this data that they put out there, it's all like voluntary, right? It's really hard sometimes to put out a landing page with a form and then hope, right? We usually kind of hope that they'll fill out the form, fill out their details, provide that email address plus more information, because we don't want to just have an anonymous record, so that we can know who they are. It's definitely a harder sell that way, right? Whereas the social channels, everybody's already volunteered some sort of information about themselves. So if you really think of it from a LinkedIn perspective, even if it's more for an educational perspective, it's more for a networking thing, if you think about it, everybody has already volunteered what their job title is. And that's just nature of that particular platform. Twitter is different, obviously, right? You would follow Twitter for different, you would use Twitter kind of as your vehicle for different reasons. But sticking with the LinkedIn channel, in particular, you volunteered kind of your years of experience already, where you've worked at previous companies, your education, your academic background, right? All those things that you voluntarily shared that with everyone, right? So there's a bigger pool of people in which you, as a digital marketer, you have access to that. So what's really nice about this is that you can then pick from those demographics, and you can actually put together your content advertisement to say, I want to put it in front of people who, you know, have X number of years in the industry, or their titles are C-level and higher, or they are a member of this particular LinkedIn group. This is very powerful when you think about it, because LinkedIn has done the heavy lifting for you to bring all those people together in one place. So now, really the effort it takes for you is really to develop what your banner ad should say, right? And what your compelling content will be. And that shouldn't be that difficult, because you as the association are familiar with what those content hooks would be. You know the value of your programs and your services, and therefore being able to craft a message that should be able to capture people should be, you know, is the easier part for you than trying to find out and like do the one-offs to try to get people to look at your content. Right, so really kind of a powerful mechanism by which to go and hunt those people whose email addresses you don't know and get in front of those people. Why is it so important? I go back to the Smart Tech Stack for growth, right? We had to punch a hole in here to break apart the retention model and put it in this recruitment model. The way we do that, obviously, we'll capture the information when we drive them to a landing page, but how do we get them to our landing page, right? That's the fundamental question. You can use banner ads and then paid advertising in the world of social media, because it's the easiest way to get in there, because a lot of the heavy lifting has already been done by those channels by virtue of kind of those people like already sharing those like-minded attributes and already being kind of where you want them to be. So really definitely something to consider if you haven't already kind of explored that. What I wanted to also do is a case study on the American Payroll Association, one of our clients, and they did kind of a very nice, simple campaign to, you know, put some of the practices of inbound marketing right into action. So one of their goals, they had a couple of goals that they wanted to complete with this campaign. One of them was to collect further insights and contact information for targeted personas. So they know who they wanted to go after. They obviously wanted to acquire new members that fit that profile, or new prospective members that fit that profile. So one, they wanted to collect that additional information. So the idea is to collect that, have that person submit their email address, see if we can get them to give up their title, possibly a couple of other pieces of information. And then, you know, once it's collected, we can further continue to work with them and engage what they're interested in. So you know, part of the challenge was providing an offer that's compelling to that particular persona, knowing that there are others out there that would react to content or the content or the program or services that they that would be compelling to them. So the idea here is to collect email addresses, initiate workflows for additional follow-up, and the end goal would be to get qualified leads that eventually we can push them down that funnel, that double-headed funnel, if you remember. So their target personas in particular, they picked two young professionals in payroll who are looking for specific information on basic topics in the field, right? This was a group that, again, it's a millennial generation, a lot of potential growth behind there, but they don't know who the organization is. The American Payroll Association is an association that's served the market for a very long time. They're very well known, but it's hard for them to get in front of this different generation, this younger generation who doesn't know that here's what the depth and breadth of the offerings that the organization has. These particular individuals are kind of starting out in their career. They've been tasked to get something done, but they don't have a lot of internal hands-on training. And again, the organization recognizes how they could essentially kind of put these particular personas on a path to membership, right? So it's like a 3-year plan of saying, come in, we'll put you through a boot camp, we'll get you ready for your next level, you can level up, here's how you get certified, here's how you, you know, move along kind of in your salary schedule, up the ladder, you know, things like that. So the idea is to go and qualify and see if we can find those personas and have them opt in. opt in to engage with us. So we put together a landing page, which is visually, the components of, again, if we go back to inbound marketing, the components of a landing page is that you have to have a compelling offer, right? You got to make sure that you're branded correctly, so that's very clear by coming to the page itself, that you know what the whole message is and who this organization is. And then you got to remember from a mechanic standpoint that it is a web page. Therefore, you do want to hit on the best practices of web marketing, right? Which is to say, everything needs to be search engine optimized, because this is a page that sits out there and it's like a beacon, if nothing else. It's broadcasting a message that comes out there. Should someone search for you, you want to be found, right? That's why SEO is so important in the world of landing pages in particular. The idea here is that, yes, could they find this information on your website? Yes. But there are a lot of other distractions on the way. If you think about kind of your own browsing experience, if you were to type something into Google, and you're looking for something like to say, I need something on how, I need some sort of tips on how to understand, payroll best practices. You type that in, you should, let's say you do get to their homepage, there's a ton of information on the homepage, very difficult for me to gauge if this is what I want to do. Also, it's a little off-putting to get that first slide up pop-up screen to say, give us your email address, when I haven't had a chance as the organization to really demonstrate and express to you why you should give that to me. Right, so that's one of the reasons why you have these landing pages sitting out there. So they broadcast your message. It's a beacon that remains static, and it's able to kind of get indexed and crawled so people can find you via search, or you can drive them through other means, right? You can drive them through, some sort of digital campaign, a marketing campaign, something along those lines, right? So that's the idea of the page itself. The most important piece on a landing page is their ask. So that form that sits out there, that is probably the most important element of the campaign. And you really, as a marketer, you have to strike the balance between how much can you get away with asking. As a marketer, you always want as much information as possible. But you understand that as a consumer, kind of as your prospect lead, they're probably a little bit leery about giving you a lot of information. I think today in today's market, I think it's a given that yes, if I'm going to give you my email address, I probably will hear from you, which is why it's important, again, from that branding perspective on the landing page, to make sure that it's very clear that, we recognize who you are. We're not wasting your time. We're not going to spam you. We really do have something that's meaningful and worth it for you to provide your information, right? So that's the real kind of balance. And I think that some organizations struggle with is, what type of really good content can we put out there, and what's the trade-off? Because if we are giving it for free, if it used to be gated and now it's not, if it used to be for, there used to be a fee for it and now we're actually removing the fee, what can we ask in return? And it's usually that trade-off. So then usually most marketers will ask a couple of questions, right? At minimum, obviously you want to get their email address, but you also want to have the opportunity to ask at least one or two questions that you in turn could build something over. So again, APA decided that, part of their persona building exercise is to say, we have content for people and throughout all stages of their career. So therefore, we need to know, where are you in your career? Or if you're just starting out, which we believe, based on kind of who we're marketing today, that you are starting out and your probably years of experience are between 1 and 3. Here are the topics of interest that you might be interested in. And the idea here is, again, to say, let's collect at minimum these 4 key pieces of information. And if we can get them to give us topics of interest, that's like an extra bonus, right? So that's the kind of the art and science about figuring out what that form should be on that landing page. Your thank you page is another element of this campaign, especially from an inbound marketing perspective. But the whole point here, and we see a lot of organizations that struggle with this, right? Putting in a lot of information on the page in the hopes that something will stick. So at minimum, at least, they'll go to something. And the idea here is to say you don't want to overwhelm your user, because you do want them to continue the journey, right? So they've given us their information. We've put in here, kind of in this particular one, we've said, welcome to our network. We've got your information. Thanks for your interest. You will receive an email with the link to download your ebook directly. All right, it should come very soon. And by the way, you're just scratching the surface. Check out the following. So we've put in a secondary user journey, but the idea here is that really kind of we just want to confirm, and we want to have that user feel good about the fact that they just gave their email address away. Right? So you definitely want to confirm, yeah, email's on the way. And when you do that, so, and there are a lot of different approaches to that. Your other approach or your other kind of setup could be You've got the thank you page, and then you've got the button to download the book right away. So it's not there's a hard and fast rule. There are different reasons why we kind of go with these different user paths or user journeys. The idea here again is just to make sure that the user understands that yes, this is on its way. Plus, we have one more thing that you might be interested in looking at, and that's it. We'll kind of leave you alone. Thanks for your email address because that was exactly what we needed. We send an automated email, at the time that they hit submit with the download to the ebook right away. Right? Again, there's a tendency to want to pack in that email with a ton of stuff to say, hey, by the way, don't forget to join. We have all this stuff. We can get a discount code or whatever, right? So it's all this information that gets crammed into the email, and you want to avoid kind of overwhelming that user. Right? The idea here is we haven't had enough, and if you remember kind of our chart in the world of inbound marketing, this is still kind of a stranger to us. They've given us information, but they even haven't turned into a visitor yet. We have to turn them into a visitor before we can make the ask, right? So we got to stick to the top of the funnel. So if you remember, the top of the funnel content is a little bit general, broader based to gauge interest, to capture some interest. Middle of the funnel is to continue that conversation back and forth. Bottom of the funnel is kind of when you get to, okay, what is it going to take to get you to purchase something? We'll give you a discount code. We'll throw in a free webinar or something. But it's otherwise, you can't bypass these steps because, again, you're shooting yourself in the foot. Right? The idea is to cultivate that relationship, and in today's day and age, especially with the generations that we're now dealing with, there's an expectation that you don't do that. It's off-putting. So this is why you kind of do this in this particular format. So this is what the American Payroll Association did. In addition to that, recognize and acknowledge that not everybody has the time to sit around and do one-off emails. Every time somebody has provided their information, right? So the idea here is let's build the automated workflows. Let's put them into a workflow so we can actually get a list of people who clicked on the link to download. And once we know that they've been engaged, we know they clicked on the link to download the paper from the ebook from the email, we know that they're interested, right? Because there are a lot of people who download or receive the ebook and then they don't actually ever open it up. Right, so these are people that we definitely know consumed the information. So why wait there? Why not just set it up into a program where once they've downloaded the materials, we'll wait a week and we'll send them something else, right? And we'll pull them a little bit more further down the funnel. It'll be kind of middle of the funnel content. And those who didn't do anything, right? Those who provided their email address, and that's great because that's what we wanted, but we know that they didn't actually download the book. They didn't download the ebook. They only got the automated email, and that's all they did. So we want to think about it and wait a couple of days and then remind them it's still there. And the idea here is then, again, to establish that rapport and establish that reputation with them, to say that, we do know you're busy. We have some information for you. But it's set up in such a way so that it's not a manual process and a burden on your side. And then you think about it from a how do you measure for success? We can go through a number of exercises. Here are all the things that you can evaluate, right? So you think about it from that perspective: number of email clicks, number of landing page views, form submissions, download clicks, where the person came from, how did they get to your landing page? Did you send them an email? Although unlikely, unless you purchase the list, or did they find you on organic search? Did you have referrals from other sites, right? So how do they get to you? But if you're thinking about truly, how do you say this particular campaign where we're cultivating or we're trying to look for people who fit into a specific persona, what would you say is like the number one thing to say this was successful or effective? And the Payroll Association essentially picked for a number of form submissions. So not necessarily the number of download clicks, right? It was to say form submissions because, again, the purpose of this campaign was to find or qualify people who fit into a specific persona. So that is actually all I have for everyone today. I'll give only give about 15 minutes back to everyone. I know it's the end of the month and the start of a long weekend. The takeaway, right? The big takeaway for this year was, again, a lot of activity around lead generation. And the focus is really thinking about how best to get your message in front of people who don't know you, right? So from that perspective, you want to be consistent in the message you put out there, and you want to know the market, right? So again, think of it from that perspective. You're going after people who are unknown to you. You know what their ideal member should be, and you're really trying to get them to understand that you have something to offer. So anything that you put out there in front of them to capture their attention, to drive them to an inbound property, digital vehicle, really has to demonstrate an understanding of what you want to say to them. You know, to push your products and to push your services ahead of establishing the offer and ahead of establishing that you have something to solve their pain point is not going to be as effective. Because if you think about it from that perspective, you're trying to have a conversation, make friends with someone who is unknown to you. You're a total stranger, you're trying to make friends with them. It's a little off-putting to talk about everything about yourself and you want them to buy your product when you haven't really had the basic general conversations of, hi, you know, tell me a little bit more about yourself. I also said, you know, experienced the same type of challenge. Here's something that, you know, was worked for us. This might work for you. Or you're more likely to get inroads and to pull those people further down into your funnel rather than coming up with the sale and the push first. Right? So even when you are thinking about those inbound campaigns, even when you are thinking about putting some of those materials together, again, we advise think about it from that perspective, from the top of the funnel content. The top of the funnel content in the world of inbound marketing is all about solving pain points. It's about overcoming challenges. It's about content that addresses the reason why the person came or possibly might have experienced something in the first place. I really want you to think of it from that perspective as well. So that's all I have for today. Again, we are building our program for the 2017-2018 HighRoad U and Inbound Lunch Bunch programs. If you have any topics that you would like, certainly feel free to kind of reach back out to us. We'll be sending you a survey. We really strongly urge you to share whatever it is that challenges that you're facing, and we're happy to kind of work that into our program. So school will be back in session in September, and happy 4th of July, everyone. I'll stay on the line if there are any questions or if anybody has anything that they'd like to ask. But other than that, have a great